Hey, what's going on, everybody? Echoside Fiend here, back once again on the Carnival Spirits channel. Of course, we took the month of September off, but here we are. We're all back. We're ready to do this. We're refocused, re-energized, re-inspired, all that good stuff. So for this video here today, I decided to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. It's something I've mentioned numerous times in videos of mine on my own personal channel or here on Carnival Spirits, and that is just the fact of the holiday of Halloween, the fall season in general, the month of October, just how it means so much to me, and how I came to be so interested in it and so connected to it. And again, like I said, I've mentioned it numerous times before, but I never really talked a lot about it, so I decided to do that today. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So as far back as I can remember, like my earliest memories of growing up, or when I was about 3 or 4, somewhere along in there, and all that time, as far back as I can remember, my dad, who is still with us, and at the age of 78, and thankfully in very good health, he was and still is very into Halloween, supernatural type of movies, just ghost stories, things like that. He's always liked that stuff. He's got a lot of little collectibles around the house. He's got like this bookcase. He's got a lot of little trinkets displayed on. He's got a lot of little like jack-o'-lantern, collectible type of things, and ghosts, and spooky old magazines and books and things like that. And my mom, who is also 78 years old and also very healthy still, thankfully, for years was in a ceramics class, and she would make my dad, ceramic figurines or sculptures, so to speak, of Halloween type of stuff. One that he still has on display year round. It's the one that my mom, put together and painted. It's like a jack-o'-lantern with like a ghost flying, like a sheeted ghost, flying out from behind the jack-o'-lantern, and he has that on display all the time. So just stuff like that. He's always been into it. He's always been a fan of, movies like old slasher flicks like the original Halloween and stuff. Not the super gory stuff, but and just thrillers and, ghost stories and things like that. And he would always let me and my brother Pat, who's 6.5 years older than me, he would always let us watch those. My mom wasn't terribly happy about him letting us watch that kind of stuff, but she put up with it. And so, I have very vivid memories of watching, like, horror movies with my dad. There was one called Ghost Story that scared me to death back then, but now I've watched it since, and it's still very good, but it's, yeah, I kind of look at it now, I'm like, really? I found this scary? But whatever. But yeah, that was like from the early 80s, like Fred Astaire is in it and stuff's weird, but yeah, just stuff like that. He let us watch Salem's Lot, which that one to this day is absolutely one of my favorite scary movies. Is the Stephen King, the original one, from 78, 79. And that one still to this day terrifies the shit out of me. I still love watching it. I'm going to watch it. I might even watch it tonight. The scene, though, of that kid, the young kid, he's like floating outside the window and he's scratching at the window, and his brother gets up and opens the window and he floats in and then bites him, and like, oh god, that fucking, to this day, like, makes the fucking hair on my arms raise up. That scene is on YouTube. Somebody put it on YouTube. I will link that in this down below. If you have not seen that movie, watch that scene, and I'm fairly certain you'll want to watch the rest of the movie. So still holds up to this day. It's fantastic. But I have a very vivid memory of watching that with my dad. I was curled up next to him as close as I could get. I think I watched about 90% of the movie, like, through my fingers. And then I remember having to go to bed, of course, in my dark room. And I remember being scared. I was sitting there with the covers pulled up to me and probably shaking. But I distinctly remember liking that feeling, because deep down inside I knew nothing was going to happen, But that is one of the first times I can recall being that scared, but being like that anxious to want to watch something else that would scare me just as much, and because again, I knew nothing was going to happen. I knew I was safe. I knew it was just entertainment, despite the fact that it scared the shit out of me, and to this day that movie is one I watch every year. He also let us watch the original Halloween, the John Carpenter, Jamie Lee Curtis Halloween. That is absolutely my favorite slasher flick of all time to this day. He let us watch all kinds of stuff like that, and that when we were young too, or when I was, like I said, my brother's 6 years older than me, but and even though it scared me and it made me not want to walk outside at night in the dark, because we lived out in the country, but I liked that feeling, and it was something that once I kind of got bit by it, I just had to have more, you know. And the one of the other very vivid memories I have of being with my dad was listening to the old radio programs, like old radio dramas that he listened to while he was growing up, and he built this collection of CDs and tapes, like trading them through newsletters and stuff. There's a big, group of collectors all through, probably throughout the world, but absolutely throughout the United States. And people would trade and make copies and all that. My dad built this huge collection. I think he still does collect them. Still building that collection of the old time radio programs, old radio dramas, and there's a few, probably several, but a few that stick out in my mind that were series that were in the genre of like horror or thriller, suspense type of stuff, or like high adventure and things like that. And one of them sticks out in my mind. The series was called The Hall of Fantasy, and there's a couple episodes of that are fantastic. One of them is called He Who Follows Me, and it's absolutely terrifying. I just listened to it the other day while I was working, and I was at a stop that I'm at for quite a while, and I found it on YouTube and listened to it. And but it's a radio drama. But this one is absolutely scary as fuck. To this day, I'll listen to it, and it makes the hair on my arms raise up, gives me goosebumps. It's creepy, totally creepy. And if my dad was listening to it, my mom wouldn't even be in the same room with him. It was that creepy. And that one would make a great movie as well. So somebody, if you have connections to Hollywood, somebody buy the rights to that fucking show and make a fucking movie of it, because it would be fantastic. Also from that same series, the Hall of Fantasy, there's one called The Hangman's Noose. That one really is really creepy, very well done, very well acted, well written. It's not as good as He Who Follows Me, in my opinion, but it's right up there. And then there's another series called Escape that had an episode that really sticks out to me. It was called Three Skeleton Key. Not so much horror, but very thriller, a little bit high adventure sort of. But could definitely fit in the horror genre if you were categorizing it. So definitely check all those out. I believe they're all on YouTube. He Who Follows Me definitely is. I will link that one up. If you got a half hour, that's about all they are. Definitely give them a listen. And if you're into that kind of stuff, horror, any type of audio, whatever, definitely look up just old time radio. There's all kinds of series out there that you'll definitely like. So give that a listen. So also around this time, I was 8, 9, 10, somewhere along in there, my folks started having Halloween parties for me. I'd have about 7 or 8 friends over, costume party. My folks would buy pumpkins for everybody, would carve pumpkins, watch something like, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow or something. And then one thing my brother and I would always do is a couple days before, me and him would get together and we'd put a scavenger hunt together for my friends to find their goodie bags. My folks would put together like some bags with treats and candy and little prizes and stuff, and we would make a scavenger hunt for them to find them. And so what we would do is cut out cardboard tombstones and write the name of each one of my friends that was coming over, and stake them in the yard. And then one of the clues would be behind their tombstone, so we had to tailor each one to my friend, each individual friend. That's something me and my brother always did together, so it's something I look back on very fondly, and just good memories. So moving on into my teenage years, when I was probably about 12 or 13, I found Tales from the Crypt. We had gotten cable when I was 10. We had HBO. I was channel surfing one night and came across it. Didn't know anything about the comics, but the TV show, the first thing that stuck out to me was that fucking intro, the music, and of course the Crypt Keeper himself. I thought he was fucking awesome. Still do think he's awesome. And then of course once I watched a few episodes, I realized it was a horror anthology series. I was really into that. And that's still one of my favorite TV series of all time, sitting right over there. I have the entire series on DVD, and it's something I still watch very frequently. Also around that time, found a TV series that still also remains one of my favorites of all time. A little more geared towards kids, but I still think it's one of the best TV series ever made, and that is, of course, Are You Afraid of the Dark? I can't even describe how awesome I thought it would have been to have my own Midnight Society. Me and my neighbor growing up, we always talked about trying to put together something like that. We had a lot of kids in the neighborhood. If we could have got some people to do some creative writing, we definitely could have done it. Of course, we didn't, but how cool would that be to have a fucking campsite out in the woods, maybe on a Friday, Saturday night, meet up with your friends at like fucking 11 or 12 at night, and share scary stories that you've written. And that's one thing I loved about it. I loved the beginning of the show where they'd all arrive at the campsite, and I was always thinking, like, your parents just let you walk through the fucking woods at night and go tell scary stories? How fucking awesome, you know? And so I really liked that. I liked how each episode would start. And again, also an anthology series. And I've never been able to find that on DVD, but thankfully, my homie down in Battle Creek, I'll keep his name secret just because I'm going to put out the term that he is a internet pirate. So, but he's one of my Juggalo homies, and he found the entire series and he downloaded it and put it on a flash drive for me. So it is something I can still watch to this day. So great, it's a great TV series. If you haven't seen it or heard of it, definitely check it out. You'll probably like it. So also around this time, because of the TV series that Tales from the Crypt and Are You Afraid of the Dark, I started branching out a little bit more at this age, finding horror movies, on my own rather than just ones my dad picked out. That's when I really got into the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Of course, I knew what they were before that, but I just hadn't really watched them. Friday the 13th, I knew what that was in elementary school, but I'd just never seen it. So I really started watching those, finding those. Just going to the video store, especially after I turned 16, I could drive. I started working right when I turned 16. In the restaurant I worked at, there was a Blockbuster Video right across the street. And very soon after I started working there, a Video Watch opened right next door. It became a Hollywood Video, but opened right next door. That's when I started, scouring around, finding any horror movie I could find, be they old or cheesy or new or whatever. I didn't care. I just wanted to see them. Throughout the years, I've built a collection of just picking them out at the store or from the used bin at video stores, and just really getting into that style of movie. And it was also around this time too, at the age of 18, I've talked about this before, that I found ICP, or that I was introduced to them and their music. At the time, I was not very much into hip hop. There was a little bit that I did like, but I was mostly into punk and metal. But finding ICP, even though it wasn't my favorite style of music, being hip hop, just the fact that they were horror based. I also liked that they were from Detroit, and just hearing them talk about the type of stuff that I liked watching on TV and in movies is what really drew me in. And so I really started getting into them, and of course it just built more and more, digging into their catalog of stuff that was out at the time. They didn't have a whole lot out yet because this was still very early in their career, but I went and found everything I could find by them, started going to see them whenever they came to town, and just added ICP onto this already growing, far beyond growing, but just expanding, I should say, maybe interest in the horror genre. So at about, I think I was 20 years old, I was actually given a copy of Resident Evil, the first Resident Evil for the Sony PlayStation. A friend of mine at that restaurant had bought it, and he finished it and just didn't really have any use for it anymore. And he was like, "Hey, have you played this? Here, take it. I don't need it anymore." I was like, "Oh, I'll give this a try." Fucking brought it home, put it in. I don't think I played any other game for probably 3 or 4 months. I played that thing through so many fucking times, tried to get every fucking ending. I wanted to do it as fast as I could, try to beat every time I go through it as fast as I could, and then try to beat however fast I made it before. Just stuff like that, man. Just going and going, playing it over and over, and then that game actually kind of sparked my interest in zombie movies, because I hadn't really been exposed to those too much yet. So then, of course, playing Resident Evil, I'm like, well, shit, man, I want to look more into this zombie horror type of stuff. And so that's at that point, started going to the video store and just finding any zombie movie I could find, old, cheesy, black and white, new color, whatever. I didn't care. I wanted to see it. So when I found Serpent and the Rainbow and shit like that, and obviously the Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, I hadn't watched any of those yet. Found all those because of Resident Evil. And so, just really started digging into that kind of stuff. And then in my early 20s is when The Haunt, local haunted attraction, opened up. I started going to that every year. It was also around this time I started taking the week of Halloween off so I could go to Hallowicked every year. And so there's one year, I think it was 2002, that really sticks out in my mind. I took the week off to go to Hallowicked. And I remember Monday Night Raw came to here in Grand Rapids, obviously on Monday. I went to that. The next night, I went to The Haunt with my friends Mike and Heather. We went through The Haunt. Got done there, and at midnight, Grand Theft Auto Vice City was coming out. I had it reserved at a Funko Land or GameStop. It might have been at this time already. But I went and picked it up at midnight after we got done at the haunt. Then I went and grabbed some beer, and then I went over to my buddy Rob's house. We stayed up all fucking night playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City. And then in the next day or two, me and Rob went to Detroit for Halloween. Actually, I think it was in Royal Oak that year, but still. And so that always that week always sticks out in my mind. Just, because I did so much that week, and it was fucking great. I was having the week off from work. But so at that point, going through the haunt, then I started trying to find any other haunted attractions I could find. There was a couple in Kalamazoo. There was one in Greenville that was really cool, but unfortunately it burned down. It was in a permanent location. But started going to that every year. And then also around this time, then taking the week off that I started doing every year, that's when October really started settling into my mind that I'm like, man, I love this time of year. For one, because I was just looking forward to having my week vacation that I would always take. But then of course just Halloween coming up, and I love the weather. I love going for walks, and I started doing this back then. Throw on a pair of headphones, listen to some music, and go for a walk. Notice that really started noticing the leaves changing color. I love that the weather is chilly, but it's not too cold. You can still rock a pair of shorts and just a zip hoodie. And believe me, my zip hoodie game is on fucking point, man. I got all kinds of good fucking cool zip hoodies that I like rocking. I like showing off. So I like being able to wear a hoodie. Just the feeling in the air. There's just something magical. I don't really know how else to describe it. When you start seeing people having their houses decorated, and I love seeing the leaves on the ground, or if somebody's raked their leaves and they're in piles, and there's just something I like about it, and all the haunted attractions start popping up, all the seasonal Halloween stores like Spirit Halloween and stuff like that. Out here in Grand Rapids, we have a big farm country just a little bit north. I love going out there because even at 42 years old, I still go grab a pumpkin every year. I grab two every year actually, and I carve them. Me and my roommate have a carving party every year. Have people over for that. But I love going out to those farms. You get to walk right out in the pumpkin field and pick out whatever you want. And most of them that we go to, they'll have like a little country store attached to it. They got donuts that they make themselves and cider. There's one that actually makes their own hard cider you can buy. And I just love it. I love going there and walking around and going to these little stores and all that kind of stuff. It's just so fucking cool. There's another one out in Greenville that I just mentioned called Clackles. That's huge. They got a fucking petting zoo, this gigantic pumpkin patch. They have a huge country store, but even though it's like huge, it's still like that very home style country store. It's not like a fucking big box store. It's like their own little, bakery, restaurant type of deal thing, all that stuff. Oh, it's so fucking cool. And then of course, just around this time of year is when I really I sit down and every throughout the week throughout the month, watch horror movies. I just kind of pick random ones out. And like I said, I always watch The Crow on the 30th. Actually on usually the weekend before now, because we always go see Twisted on the 29th. But I'm sorry, on the 30th. But so we'll watch it the weekend before or something like that, or on the 29th. But I always watch The Crow. In listening to music, I always listen to ICP, Twisted, Typo Negative, Nox Arcana. They're really cool, like kind of neoclassical, ambient, dark wave, something like that. They're fucking awesome though. Check them out. NOX, then Arcana. So Nox Arcana, Midnight Syndicate, they're fucking cool too. I think that's the one ICP had a little bit of a legal problem with, but whatever. But yeah, I always listen to music, again, movies, and I kind of strayed off that a little bit. But yeah, I always watch Halloween, Salem's Lot, The Blair Witch Project. I don't care what anybody fucking says. That is a fucking great movie. That movie Ghost Story that I mentioned. Elm Street series, Friday the 13th. There's a great movie called The Midnight Hour. It's very family friendly, but it's from the mid 80s. It's actually on YouTube. The whole movie is on YouTube. I'll fucking link that up too. Like I said, it's a little more family friendly, but it's fucking great. I watch that every year. There's also a very good version of Nosferatu that is also on YouTube, and it's actually an official release by Typo Negative, or at least by their record company. And it's Nosferatu, the original silent film, but dubbed over with Typo Negative music. And not just hey, here's a Typo Negative song, stick it on this fucking movie. It is actually edited so it fits with what's going on. It's fucking great. So check that out as well. That's on YouTube. And then of course, like I said, Tales from the Crypt. Are You Afraid of the Dark? I'll just throw in a DVD or my flash drive and just pick out an episode of that from time to time and watch it. And that's what I do the whole month of October. And believe me, I make full use of my weekends during October, watching movies, listening to music, doing all that fun stuff. And then, of course, the whole month, this whole season, as far as I'm concerned, is building up to fucking Hallowicked. Go to that every year. This year will be my 15th consecutive Hallowicked. I've also been to 3 more before that. So this would be my 18th total. Just my favorite event of the year. I don't have to explain that probably anymore. I'm sure you're probably all sick of me saying it, but it just is. And all these past couple of years, I can't wait to see everybody from Carnival Spirits. Going there with Crazy McCormick, Real Guido, Raven Breed. I think she's joining us again this year. It's just so much fun going to that every year. We got friends that come from out of town. Miss Hollywood, our friends Gina and Matt come from Canada. Oftentimes our friend Tom comes over from England. And it's just fucking great being there with everybody, rocking out with our boys ICP who are on stage, throwing the fuck down in Detroit on Halloween. I mean, how much fucking better can it get? And then, of course, we lately have been going to see Twisted the night before. I mean, fucking come on. Twisted and then ICP on Halloween in fucking Detroit. It doesn't get any better than that. I don't fucking care what anybody says. But, yeah, so the whole month just builds up to that, and it's the one thing I'm looking forward to the whole year. And, of course, we're already almost there. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. So if you stuck this all the way through, thank you so much. I hope you found it interesting. And I hope maybe that makes you look back on why you are so much into this time of year, if you are. So I'm going to end this with a quote from one of my favorite ICP songs. Of course, Dead Pumpkins. And it goes, "Up to the moonlight, I'm gone from the scene. Peace to Detroit City, and have a dead pumpkin Halloween." This has been Echoside Fiend. Thank you for watching. Too sweet.